just want to sort of point to the importance of this campaign. It not only sets the standard for UK and the type of society we want to live in, it sets the standard for the rest of the world as well. I mean, that's very important. If people in Pakistan, in Iran, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia see that they have Sharia law in Britain, what's the point of fighting injustice of Islamic movement in which is imposing on the lives of millions of people? It's important that we set a standard very clearly, and that's the importance of link. It's not an isolated sort of campaign. It's happening in Britain. Actually, links. It sets the standard for everybody. And that's so crucial because people are watching. They looked at the campaign in Canada and they showed to the world that Islamic arbitration councils and Sharia courts they're actually imposing equality and has no standing in a civilized society. And now the Islamists are trying it in Britain. And we have to set that standard and actually say this is wrong, this is unjust, and we have to abolish it. And it's important that we say that. I think it has so much dimension for everybody else. As you said, that Islamists in Britain possibly are the strongest in Europe, the most organized. And this is a battle we need to fight. And I think it's so important to be clear about this issue. Thank you.
I think somebody at the back said, what's the focus? And that's the problem here. The problem isn't, let's ban Sharia councils, let's ban religious tribunals. We would all agree, I think everybody on this panel, and I suspect the whole of the audience would agree, that religious laws, when they encroach particularly upon family affairs, can produce very unequal anti-human rights results. The question is, what is the focus of any campaign? And the problem with Sharia councils is they're very much informal setups set outside the legal system. And that's what I'm trying to get at, which is something that Carl has just also endorsed. They are informal mechanisms. They're not some set up bodies where there are, there can be one person, there can be 3 people, there can be 2 people. There can be an imam and lay people. So there's no body as such called Sharia councils. They take place in mosques. And they can be very, very informal. And so it becomes difficult to say, ban Sharia councils. I hate them. I hate them for what they do to women. I agree with everything in terms of how they implement and mediate on women's issues. The problem is, when you say ban them, you're effectively going to be saying how that should be enforced. Are you going to have police officers raiding temples, raiding mosques, raiding gurdwaras because they think that there's some kind of mediation going on? What I'm trying to get at is how difficult it is in terms of following that to its logical conclusion. A much more sharper focus is on the tribunals, and the reason why the tribunals are particularly problematic is they are no longer informal. They are being formalized within the legal system so that the decisions are binding. The Sharia Council decisions are not binding. The tribunal decisions are binding in the sense that if women then choose to go to court and argue that they didn't know what they were doing when they agreed to be bound by the outcome, a court will argue that unless she can produce evidence of duress, the decision is binding. So in other words, there's backup from the legal system in relation to tribunal decisions. That's why it becomes much more clearer to focus on banning tribunals, because they are part of the legal system, they are creating parallel legal systems, and they are being legitimized. Which is not to say that Sharia councils are great and we shouldn't be doing. I think by focusing on the tribunals in any event, you are raising what is wrong with the whole way in which religious laws are used to discriminate profoundly against women. I think, Inan, you're right. I think this isn't just about religion. What this is about is political movements. And what we're talking about here in particular is fundamentalist political movements which see apart from other things, a control of women's minds and bodies as essential to their objectives that they want to reach, which is controlling their constituencies. So to that extent, this is wider than just against Islam. All religious right movements focus on dissenting from within, clamping down on dissent from within, and clamping down on women's rights. Now, multicultural spaces have always existed, and secularists have created them, but secularists have also fought against them. And we shouldn't forget the history, the anti-racist, secular, feminist history in this country, which has also fought against the ways in which the state has endorsed and legitimized undemocratic institutions and spaces and social relations. So what we're talking about, in effect, is trying to create a human rights culture in which women's human rights are central to human rights, citizenship, culture. And for those, and this has been said before by the panelists, but for those people who think that human rights are somehow Western concepts, are deluding themselves. Human rights have been fought for around the world. Women in Iran, Pakistan, India, Africa, South America are fighting for human rights. And human rights are evolving principles. When human rights were conceived, they didn't include women's human rights. It's women and feminists who have struggled and have got the idea of women's rights accepted as human rights. So to those who argue that they're somehow Western concepts, well, that's just bullshit. They're not. They are fought for around the world by many who are powerless. And we have got to safeguard them with every breath that we have in our body, because they are all we've got. They are imperfect. They need to be built upon, but we do need to safeguard them. And we cannot have a legal system, a state endorsing religious tribunals, whether they're Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, or Muslim. They are all profoundly discriminatory. We have to resist them, but I do think tactically we also have to think about how we take the campaign demands forward. That's the only slight disagreement I have tactically, but I do agree, and the organizations that I'm from would very much support the wider objectives, which is one law for all. Secularism is not anti-religion. Secularism is about, it's a precondition, a necessary precondition, along with democracy, to enable people to coexist side by side, believers and non-believers, but without anyone imposing things on others. Right.
Thank you very much for all. Thank you all, you great panelists. They've been really great, and I think they've all had a lot of. I'm sorry that we didn't have enough more time for you at the floor, and I'm sure if we had more time, there would be more interesting discussion. I would like to finish this by giving Mariam Namazi as the organizer, the main organizer of this campaign and this event, to just say a few words on how we're going to carry on, and then we finish the evening. I want to thank you all for coming here. You've been great audience, great people here, and you've been really good, and you had made this evening worthwhile. And also I want to thank all people who've been involved in organizing this, especially being asked to thank Goranka for all those lovely cakes that she made, and everybody enjoyed it.